Thank you, Boris, for introduction. So welcome to our session entitled Tagged PDF in 2.0. We would like to explain what has changed in ISO 32000-2 when it comes to tagging. For many years, tagging has been seen as a way to achieve accessibility. In 2.0, we see a lot of changes that are significant and important when it comes to accessibility, as well as when it comes to Interchange and repurposing. I'm Roman Toda. Here is with me Yulian Gaponeko. We are both software developers experienced with building systems and applications based on tagged PDF files. And today we'd love to share our experiences, and we hope that you can join us on our way to exploring more possibilities with 2.0. So, what has changed? As Boris said, the major rework has been done in all the chapters around tagging and tagged PDF. If you compare just the size of the text in 1.7 and in 2.0 in standards, we see increase of about 30% in the text. So just the length of the text speaks to itself. We see a lot of rewritten chapters, a lot of chapters that are new, a lot of new language, and all of that is aimed to fix all the problems that 1.7 does have in terms of accessibility. But most of the new language is very useful and very helpful when it comes to implementing things like repurposing of the content. So as I said, we saw a lot of rewritten chapters, we saw a lot of editorial changes. As you all may understand, PDF 1.7 was released 10 years ago. Now we have PDF 2.0, but between that, PDF Association also released PDF UA standard, which covers a lot of problems and fixed a lot of problems of 1.7 when it comes to accessibility. So all those changes have been incorporated into editorial changes, into the major rework I mentioned. We saw removed tags, namely 14 tags were removed and deprecated from 2.0. They are all listed there. The reason for that is because they were duplicated. People didn't use them properly from the accessibility point of view. They were not precisely interpreted. We also see 9 new tags or standard structure types, to be precise, in terms of PDF language. Let me tell you something about one specific tag that's been introduced in 2.0, which is artifact. In 1.7 and all other formats, whatever was not marked or whatever was not tagged was considered as an artifact. It didn't work very well, because if you don't mark something as a structure element, it doesn't exist. Screen readers, applications don't see it. So it's pretty hard to distinguish where in logical order actually this part take a place. In 2.0, artifacts has to be tagged as artifact, and it's up to reader, up to processor to decide whatever he wants to do with the element there. However, he can decide not to process it. The structure, the information of the order is there, and it's really up to processor to do what he wants to do that. Another new tag is aside. In this particular sample, we tagged our logos and names as aside. It is something what's not related to any particular content. Some might argue that in this specific case, our logos and names should be marked as artifacts as well. However, we think that they do have very significant semantical information, so we keep it as it is there. We also see a lot of new things coming up when it comes to attribute owners in 2.0. Attributes are additional information that you can stick to a tag or structure element, and as you can see, we have also a couple of changes in standard attribute owners. Like in layout, we do have new text position, so you can identify what is subscript or superscript. That was not here before, but we also introducing new attribute owners, new groups of attributes, and of course artifacts needs to be there because we're tagging artifacts, and we need to provide and keep carry the information what type of artifact it is, if it's a header, footer, page number, line number, and so on and so on. We are also adding a lot of new attribute owners or groups of attributes that developers can use to actually enrich the information of a structure. And it's a language around HTML, CSS, area, for example, and also some namespaces. This allows developers that are doing conversions to preserve the information that exists in the original document, especially in HTML, in the same way as it is in the original file, and you can carry it to a PDF. That way you're not losing anything during the conversion, and then the processor, post-processor, can decide based on this information. So you're basically using the same language as it is in the original file. Another example I'd like to mention is a new attribute for list numbering. As we all know, lists are properly tagged. You have a list item, and you can provide an information about the label there. The label could be decimal, could be it's all information. It's old information that's been in 1.7 as well. However, we had difficulties, or developers had difficulties to mark lists that are break with something, some content, maybe page break, and so on. So you can now provide the information that this list is continuous. So even if it's broken by some other content, and the content could be marked, it could be artifact, for example, page numbering, whatever, but you have the information, you can say that the list is continuing. And yeah, let me give a hand to give a word to Yulian here. So,
thank you, Roman. So we've talked about the new text set for 2.0. However, how do we exactly represent it inside the PDF document, and how is it different from the previous versions? So let's look about a bit more technical stuff. Here you can see another document that is tagged with the new text, like document fragment is probably the new one, EM, and so on. So let's have a look inside. In order to see the changes, you would need to look at the document logical structure tree, and as you see, there are a few new entries there, like AF or REF. We'll talk about those two a bit later. And you also can notice that every structure element dictionary contains the NS entry, which denotes the namespace. Namespaces mechanism is one of the core changes in the document logical structure, and what should you know about them? First of all, from PDF 2.0 point of view, it is considered that every structure element type is a part of some namespace. Inside the document, you can have one or more namespaces, and every namespace actually contains, may contain the role mapping, its own role mapping that is to another namespaces, or it can define mappings inside itself. And also namespaces are defined by the Namespace Dictionary. Here how it looks like. First is of course type entry. It's optional, and if it's present it shall be namespace. Then the only required entry, that is NS, and its main role is to serve as an identifier. It's the name of the namespace, and as a common practice it should be an URI. However, just as an XML world, it's not generally expected that it shall resolve. It's used for the uniqueness. This particular namespace name refers to standard structure namespace for PDF 2.0. I'll explain in a minute what does this mean. Meanwhile, there are two more entries. One is schema, and it's used to define the namespace. However, it's important to understand that it's optional. It's more like the way, if you want to put this information in the document, this is how you can do it. And well, there is actually even no specified format for this schema. You can use some XML schema language, for example. And another entry is Rollmops, which is namespace role mappings, which I've talked already a bit. And you can see that its structure is almost the same as it was for the previous versions. Its difference is that for every entry, its value is an array of two items. The first item is role mapping destination role, and the second item is a reference to the namespace to which this destination role belongs. And as well, as you can see from this example, you can role map to the same namespace, like to the current namespace. So I've mentioned standard structure namespaces. What are they exactly? Like in tagged PDFs, in order to fully comply to the notion of tagged PDF, every structure element shall either be standard or it shall be role mapped to standard ones. And standard structure namespaces are the ones that are defined by the specification. So in PDF 2.0 specification, there are two namespaces that are called standard and that contain standard structure types. The first one is which I've already named on the previous slide, and it contains tags about which Roman talked, and that are defined in the text PDF clause in the new specification. And the second standard structure namespace is the same, but for the previous version of specification. It's for the text set from the PDF 1.7. This actually means that you can create a document that contains 1.7 text set, and at the same time you don't have to add role mappings to it. And this creates a great deal of backward compatibility, and what is even more, that actually NS entry is optional entry for the structure element dictionary, and if it's omitted, structure element is considered under the default namespace, which is standard namespace for PDF 1.7. So this text structure, it is equivalent to the previous one, and at the same time you would see the same text structure in the 1.7 documents. So as I said, tagged PDF for 2.0 is backward compatible with 1.7, and you can either update tagged PDF documents from 1.7 to 2.0, and or for example, you can, if you're only starting to create new documents, you can not update immediately the tagging mechanism, and you can start using new features. So that's it for the standard structure namespaces. And what actually are the new possibilities that namespaces provide. You could have introduced custom structure types even before, and this method, by just specifying custom structure types and adding a role map inside the structure tree root role map entry, this method is also working inside the PDF 2.0. However, there is a more explicit and more neat approach by specifying your own custom namespace. You can either create a new namespace, just maybe randomly or somehow come up with it, and or you can reuse commonly known namespaces, for example, from XML world that define some domain-specific languages, or you can use some common formats like open document format or HTML. So this allows you to preserve more information inside the PDF, and what is important that this information can be reliably identified by third-party tools. You can know if you specified, for example, that that this structure element belongs to a namespace, and you know the name of this namespace, you immediately and certainly know what it is and what does it mean. So this facilitates the document understanding. However, it's not always about supplementing the, adding supplement data. It's also, there are some domain-specific languages like math that you cannot properly tag with existing structures from the standard structure tag set. And just imagine a multi-level mathematical expression. How would you tag it with diffs or spans? And in order to process those such kind of domain-specific languages, there is a special subclause in the specification that is designed to list the domain-specific languages that do not require role mapping. Currently, there is only one such namespace. It's MathML, and how do you actually tag with it? Here you can see quite well. On the left, there is some text, and below it there is a quite trivial mathematical expression. In the center, there is a text structure that corresponds to it, and on the right, you can see how every custom structure element is defined by the example of math element. First, you identify the type to be equal to the MathML structure element name. And second, you have to explicitly identify the namespace, and you can see it right below. And its name is equal again to the XML namespace for the MathML. It's pretty easy, and in this example, you can notice that there is no role map NS entry, no special role mapping for the MathML, but for any other custom structure namespaces, you would need to specify it. So namespaces are not the only new syntax thing that is introduced. So I'll let Roman to speak about some others.
Yeah, thanks. As we mentioned earlier, tagging has been used mainly for making PDF accessible, but with this new language, we are actually breaking barriers there. So far, the structure tree root lived different lives than the content itself. So you did have two different information inside one PDF file, and the aim was to connect these more together and to achieve better connection between the content as well as the structure tree itself, because the aim is actually to have the ability to consume PDF based on the structure tree root, not based on the content itself. that's the main idea. We introduced in 2.0 new languages, so you can use actually the namespaces, as Yulian mentioned, from the other worlds, from the HTML, from XML, even from worlds that are not yet discovered. You just use it, you know, and that would be pretty valid. But that's not all what PDF 2.0 brings to the game. Structured destination, very nice small feature that actually helps to do the connection between the structured tree root as well as the content. We know that destination is something what defines a place in a document. It could be the same document or a removed document. In 1.7 we did have two options how to define, well, generally two options how to define the destination. You can say explicitly the page plus the area on the page where you can go if you click on a link, for example, if you trigger an action, or you can use, or you could use name destination. That's all still valid. In 2.0 we added structure destination. So it's a link, or not link, it's an action that's associated with the structure element. And you can do it in two different ways. So you can provide direct reference to the structure element, or you can provide, if it's inside of the same file, or you provide ID of the structure element if it's a removed file. So in practice, it would look something like this. So you have a link on a file on the left. The link has attached an action, and the action contains direct reference to a structure element, which is of subtype and H2 in this case. Of course, that brings a burden for PDF viewers, because if end user clicks on the link, PDF viewer has to find the proper page, and it's not that straightforward. If you have a structured tree root, structure element, doesn't have to contain any specific content on a page. So you have to dig a little deeper. There is an algorithm how to find out how to get to a proper page. To be honest, this existed in 1.7 in some fashion. Outlines is one example that could contain specific SE element in a dictionary that could point to structure element. So you could actually in 1.7 do an action from an outline bookmark, so-called bookmark, to a structure element. In PDF 2.0 you can do it with any action within the file. So that's the connection between content and structure tree, which is very helpful when processing file based on structure tree. Another very good language that's been introduced in 2.0 is associated files. Through AF key, you can attach associated file to almost anything. Catalog, page, XObject, annotation, even to a graphic object through marked content. But what's more important, you can attach associated file to a structure element. So to a particular place in the structure tree root, you can attach a file. There, as you can see, you have to, well, the structure element, the entry of AF dictionary points to a file specification dictionary. You have the whole file embedded, and but the 2.0 mandates to use AF relationship, which is something what defines the relationship between the structure element and the associated file. And it could be it could be source, it could be data. You can say that this file is alternative to the structure tree and all the descendants. It could be supplement and so on and so on. Existence of AF relationship doesn't mandate anything for when it comes to processing. So processor can decide what he wants to do with it. But again, it's additional information you provide when you are developing system based on tagging. This ensures that you have a language that helps you to capture everything what's inside of the original file. And how does that look like in practice. So let's have a look at this simple table. It's stacked, table, rows, and so on. And the table would have, well, I forgot to mention that AF could be, or is an array. So you might have not just one associated file, but array of associated files with each structure element. In this case, I'm providing only one, and you can provide AF with AF relationship data to the structure, to the whole table, and the table and the file would capture CSV file with the original data in it. Again, very helpful when it comes to converting things like charts, tables. You can put there whole XLS if you wanted to, or if you think that's helpful for post-processing in very specific workflows, very useful, and again, gives you ability to inject as many informations during the conversion as possible. Another new language that's been kind of discussed during the 2.0 development is usage of the links and connection between the content and structure elements. In 1.7, to achieve something like described in here, so you have a label that points to a node under the text. You could do that via link. Okay, so you mark the small I, and then you have a link as an object reference to a certain text and to certain annotation, and then you have you mark the node something as a node something what's below the text. This is still possible in 2.0. In 1.7, we also did have the way to do this a little differently via the reference tag. So you would mark the reference, you would mark the label as I, and then you would mark the node there. Again, the node has to have the same label as the reference there. Not very efficient. You can't really do a processor that would jump directly from one place to another in the document. This is not allowed in 2.0 because the reference has been deprecated. For that, 2.0 introduces a new language. It's called ref. So how would that look like in 2.0 world? You'd have a label, you'd have a content of the label, the small I, and as attributes of the tag, you would provide the reference to a direct structure element in the structure tree. So to that FE node. Of course, on the first example, I said that this is allowed in 2.0 still. It's not that true because node was deprecated, was replicated by FE node. So if you switch node to FE node, it would be valid in 2.0. But this is the language we want to use now. So the processor, as he is reading or consuming the file, can jump or can give you an option to directly jump to a node or pop up the node. Pop-up node could be read for you, and so on. So it doesn't have to do any major searching in structure tree root. Another great addition in 2.0 is this big table. We call it Annex L, and it defines relationship between tags. As we know, 1.7 was not very good at defining what could be parent of which tag could be parent of which, what tag could be the child of which tag. With PDF UA, it got a little better. However, in 2.0, we achieved semantically precise definition. This table tells you that, for example, LI, which is list item, as a parent, can have 0 to n FE nodes. Yeah? Another example, table can't contain strong. So you can't have on a table associated a tag that is strong. Of course, you can on a TD or TH or something like that, but not directly on a table. Right? So this is this table is a very good tool for achieving or for testing your outputs when it comes to tag. You can easily create a small validator that validates your job when doing tagging. Very efficient. And let me ask Yulian to give you a little guidance through one specific use case, one specific sample. Please.
So let's conclude with by looking at the format interchange context and how it is enriched with new features from PDF 2.0. Like, imagine you have an HTML file and you want to convert it to PDF, and also you might want other third-party tools to be able to acknowledge that this document was converted from the HTML, that its structure was derived from the HTML. So you might use for that an HTML, like in this example, XHTML namespace, and you would also need to provide the role mapping for that. You have some technical problems. Let's hope it will get better soon. Right. So this is a small example of how it can be done. It might get a bit tricky because there are different nesting rules for HTML and PDF, and they are not exactly direct, but in general it is solvable. And another thing is that it's always a pity that when you create a PDF document, you lose all the information of the context from which this PDF was created. In this example, if it's converted from HTML, HTML elements can have some attributes which do not have any direct analog in PDF world, and like for example, each ref length is such attribute that identifies the language of the page or place where this link refers to. So you might want to preserve it, and you can use for these attributes. You can also see that here we use standard attribute owners. You might want to prefer those over the namespaces because, well, it's somewhat backward compatible. So, and also, for example, for CSS, if you also want to preserve CSS attributes, you don't have a namespace for that, so you simply identify it as an attribute owner. Also, in HTML world, it's a common thing to associate some files with HTMLs. Obvious example is, again, CSS files. We always think about CSS files as a styling thing, and it's not that important for document understanding, but also modern versions of CSS provide information for formatting, and they have a special chapters that are about paged media, and it, for example, can identify the page breaks between the certain header levels, and this actually might affect document understanding in some cases. So again, you can associate these files with some element from the structure tree. Another thing is that other formats can contain their own mechanisms for accessibility. For example, in HTML, such thing is called area, and while it's a different world, they can be aimed at a bit different things. For example, in area is more about some dynamic things, some navigation or forms, and this is usually not the most popular thing in PDFs. However, these examples still can occur inside the PDF documents. For example, in this HTML page that I have converted, there is a table that contains links to associated articles. And actually its role to serve as a navigation tool, and in PDF there is no language for that, and by preserving the area attributes you can specify that this is exactly for navigation. A bit more practical example again about structured destinations is that in HTML to PDF conversion there was in HTML there is such thing as links between elements, and previously, when HTMLs were converted to PDFs, this information was lost and there was no reliable way to restore it. And as Roman explained, this is improved in 2.0. So in the end, well, I want to say that we didn't have the time to speak all the new things in PDF 2.0, like pronunciation hints. Also, in my examples, I didn't show, like in those particular examples, there were no application of attributes that belong to certain namespace. However, there are a lot of more other formats. I've talked only about MetaMail and HTML, but there are dozens of other languages that can solve problems that are present in PDF today. And so it's not only about the like for the conversion. These are the languages that might provide already known ways of preserving the semantics. Also, this new version, specification version, it's new, but you can be sure that there will be even more new versions, and some issues will come up, and and those issues will be fixed. So what can we do as a PDF community, as developers today? I think that we should be open for inventing new ways, new practices. Like there are dozens of numerous examples of use cases that it's not clear how to tag them properly and how to use new features for them. By solving those issues, and even when we get not ideally tagged PDFs, or it's not really clear is it ideally tagged or not, I think that it's okay that some PDFs can be not ideally tagged. There are some applications where it's not acceptable, but not ideally tagged PDF is far more better than not tagged PDF at all in terms of document understanding. And therefore, we can preserve the more information. Yes, it's in some examples it's not really suitable in some use cases. If you have a really great big database, you want the size of PDFs to be very small, but in modern world space is not a problem, and for the most part, and therefore you can preserve all this information I've been talking about, and by creating those new enriched PDFs, we can facilitate the creation of new approaches that process such documents, and that help to improve the document's understanding. So that's it. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, you can get in touch with us. Here are our contacts.
Thank you. So are there any questions? Yes, I see hands.
Hello. I find this namespace feature very interesting, but it seems to be very vague. So you said that the schema information is optional and may not mean anything, or maybe in all kinds of different formats. So what are reader applications supposed to do with that? So is there any provision that the schema has to define the language used, or what is the approach with the schema, with validation of the language?
Well, I think that that's a very valid point, and what I think is that it was done purposely for now. So it's only the first introduction of namespaces, and we don't want to like put borders on how it's going to be used. Like you can, indeed there are some peculiarities where it's not clear what does the namespace mean, but when you use some commonly known namespace, probably it's expected that like MathML, that it's gonna adhere to MathML language. So I think it's something that we as a community should understand in process of working with that, how it's gonna be the best to work with it.
Yeah. Just to add on top of that, I don't think that the whole tagging is something what should be mandatory. It should help you, help developers, help consumers to actually get a lot more out of the PDF than we currently don't have an option. If we don't use tagging, if we don't use anything semantically, any semantical information in a PDF, we just have a blank of paper. That's it. We don't have any.
You have no semantics when you don't have a schema. There's no semantics. It's
well, but in your enclosed environment, you can come up with your own schema. You can do whatever you want. You can start at some point when converting from something. Could be your database, could be your list of, I don't know, orders, whatever. You can come up with your own language, and at the end of the day, you'll be able to process these things. While if you do conversion to a PDF via printer driver, you're lost at the end of the day. You won't get information about math, for example, about charts, about whatever is important for you. So this is a language that can help you, help developers to actually build sophisticated systems, applications, workflows, and provide more information, enrich the file that we know, that we have now. And the thing with namespaces, it is a standardized way. So we are introducing language like HTML, CSS, because HTML is far more the most used format now. However, you can use your own namespaces as well, or namespaces that will come up later, maybe tomorrow.
So it's all about common practices, and it's about providing a base for better practices to be built on. So,
yeah.
But the format behind the namespace is unclear. Anything, or can we use that there were namespaces to? If I use the HTML5 namespace or math, do I have to pass the XML? Or translate this to XML and then validate it. Yeah, the namespace is an URL. That's
yes.
That URL refers to a specification, and that is a very clear definition of what it should contain.
Well, I think we are starting to dwell into very technical discussions so that we continue during lunchtime. I see other questions. Yeah, probably that one came here. Yeah, you can speak up.
Yeah, I have a question about this. So you mentioned the representation that some elements can be interpreted in a different way. Are there any guidelines in terms of how to map like a custom namespace into the standard ones? What's the utility of a standard namespace if you don't have a guidelines in terms of mapping our structures?
Well, let me start with what we had in 1.7. So in 1.7, there was a clear sentence or clear statement that you can come up with your own structure element types. So for example, you're writing a document in a Word, you use styles, heading 1, heading 2, document, fragment, whatever. But at some point you have to provide role mapping to standard structure element types. So processor can rely on the information you provided from Word, like is it style number 1, my own style, but the PDF has to contain the information about standard structure element type as well. So this is something what has to be provided. So you actually can look at the PDF as a naked with just standard structure element types, and you can process it that way, right? But if you want to take advantage of the additional information, you can do it. And if you're asking about tagging, there is a lot of discussions about how to properly tag, for example, list. You have list items, labels, and so on, how to tag FE node, what has to be where, and so on. It's something what PDF Association is currently working on. It's been in development for many years. Is that a good statement? For quite a time. And PDF Association is building a document with called Best Practice Guide for Tagging. It's a code name, something like that, where you can actually find a way how to properly tag standard structure types like list, like a table, like nodes, things like that. And when it comes to namespaces, you actually you can see that as an advantage. You can use this language for your own purposes. You can still rely on the all standard structure element types. That's all fine. But this could be seen as an advantage of providing additional information, which is something what I believe is very important when it comes to post-processing those files, especially in your own workflows, for example.
And also about role maps. Yes, role mapping can be tricky, but again, with this approach to specify separate role map for a separate namespace, this can also be a matter of finding best practices. Like at certain moment, maybe we will come up with some ideal role mapping between HTML to PDF, or maybe there might be several such role mappings for different use cases, something like that.
Yeah.
I will speak loud.
Yeah.
Tagging is very expensive in terms of space in the file. So if you have a file there and you add the normal tagging plus the HTML tagging, the file size would get very big. Do you have any? First of all, is there any discussions about that? And second, do you have any experience how much the file size would grow?
Well, that's a valid point. And yes, you're right. The tagging itself, even doing the basic mark content, the content itself blows up, or could blow up if you do poor job. Let's put it in that way. If you add structure tree, it's not as much, to be honest. It's like providing bookmarks. So the structure tree doesn't weigh too much. This new language may actually be a problem when you will start adding attached associated files, when you start adding different, alternative representation of every table. You can provide a table with data with different presentational layer as well. You can provide chart with, again, underlying data, underlying different visual expressions of the chart, and so on. Yes, it could be a problem, and again, you don't have to do that. And you asked if there was a discussion about that. I don't think so. I don't remember anyone concerning the file size in this specific case. And I know if we are talking about world of mobile devices and of processing your PDF file on your watch or on devices that don't have a display, that might be something worth considering when you are building proper structure for consumer. So yes,
yeah,
you're right.
But again, at the same time, if you think about HTML to PDF conversion, you can hardly think about the HTML without images, and even single image would probably of like considerable resolution will probably take much more space than like really big HTML files. So it's mostly about plain text when we speak about integrating, embedding the other formats structure. So it shouldn't be that much of a like additional weight size.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Probably I'll take 2 more questions because lunchtime is approaching. Yeah.
I have a rather big experience with tagging of PDF, and sometimes I don't know, is it advantage or is it a problem? Because a lot of providers has not correct tagging system, and after that, when I try to use this tagging structure, for instance, to convert in another form to Word, another one, I see that it's not a real structure, but the rows of tables not the same rows, and that's all. So, do you keep in your mind some maybe procedure of certification who can provide, who can create tagging structure? Maybe not can, but who, for whom I could rely to and use this structure? This is the first question, and maybe it's enough.
It's okay. Yeah, thanks. And yes, you're right. The adoption isn't.
For PDF already.
Yeah, you're right. The adoption isn't great when it comes to tagging in general. With PDF UA is a situation a little different. They do have this Matterhorn protocol, and also you can validate the good tagging by running it against the screen reader, for example. So in this case, it might be a little easier, but in general use cases, yes, I see that as a problem as well. We're talking a lot about tagging, but we are not doing it properly. We are not doing it at all. Yulian said that it's probably better to have bad tagged PDF file than not to provide any tagging. And I still think that's a valid point, because current readers, for example, if you have a reading order, you do a selection, text selection, you may run your own heuristics, how to provide the page map, how to order text together, so you can provide the best experience out there. On contrary, if you have a tagged PDF file, you may try to use it and use this information in some fashion. I understand that developers don't want to do that, don't want to develop 2 different pieces of code for the same function, right? But it is something what would need to be done, because we are slowly shifting. I see the shift in generation of PDF files from the plain PDF files as we've seen them for many years to tagged PDF files. And the information in the structure tree is relevant. Maybe not as great as we would hope for, but still relevant. So yes, I share your concerns. Maybe we are too far with the language than we are with the implementations. But, you know, it's up to us. We are in this room mainly developers, and we should be the ones who will provide the best solutions for everybody.
And actually, I think that the validation is, yes, it's a real problem, but even today and tomorrow there will be several talks about how the logical structure can be extracted, how can it be heuristically evaluated. So I think that it's a question of how validation would be developing. And yes, we discuss it and think about it.
For new format PDF 2.0, it's we will think about this more concrete
in a more conceptual way. Yeah. Well, yes. You will.
Thomas Merz of PDF. We implemented tag PDF 2.0, and I must say that the presentation in the new standard is much clearer than in the previous versions. And also the NXL table with the nesting matrix was very helpful. So this is really appreciated and much better than earlier versions of the standard. I have some concerns, however. There is the namespace machinery. It forces me to designate each and every tag with its own namespace. So as I understand, the default namespace in PDF 2.0 is PDF 1.7. So for example, if I want to create a PDF 2 document containing PDF 2.0 tags, I must designate all of the tags with the same namespace, which forces me to create a lot of redundancy in the output file. So that's just a technical comment which defeats some optimization. The other problem is the handling of mixtures PDF 1.7 tags in a PDF 2.0 document in combination with PDF 2 tags. We have the nesting rules in this nice NXL matrix, but it only applies to PDF 2 tags. Now I have a mixture of PDF 2 and PDF 1.7 tags, and the tag sets overlap.
Yes.
So how to deal with points where I have some kind of collision. I have, let's say, an imported page with PDF 2 tags. It is placed inside a page containing a PDF 1.7 or the other way around. So nothing is said about the nesting rules which apply to this border area.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you have any comments on that?
That's a hard one.
Yes.
Both of them are hard ones. So let me touch on the 1.7 versus 2.0 tag sets. Yes, everybody are facing the same issue here, and I can only tell what experiences we do have and what we did. I'm not saying this is the right way to do that. However, we still rely on 1.7 tag set. We came up with our version of NXL for 1.7, which is our own, and we also did a couple of decisions that we are adopting 2.0 tags. We internally say we are not using some of the 1.7 tags, and we are providing for those 2.0 tags, we are providing role mapping. And we are hoping that at some point we will delete the role maps. So that's kind of the shortcut we are using. And I understand, not for everybody, not for, it's not the perfect way to do that. However, at the moment, I don't think we do have any other better option. So maybe you're facing, or you're doing the same thing as well. And just to mention to the NXL, yeah, that's a great tool. However, it doesn't encapsulate everything. There are still sentences in PDF spec that says something. Yes, you can use, I don't know, H under parent, but it shall be the first one and only one H within the parent, and so on. This is not captured in the NXL. So you would need to read the specification through and pick up all those small things as well to do the proper validation.
There are also a few places where the text has additional constraints regarding...
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I forgot to mention when I was talking about the NXL, so it's worth to consider reading the text as well, not just, blindly. So yeah, I'm not sure I answered your question, but...
I understand basically you said, yes, there are gaps and everybody has to find their way through the gaps.
Yes.
Well, okay, last question for now, because I think some people are already waiting for lunch.
Question. PDF, there are many PDF tools for kind of organizing or editing PDFs, splitting, merging pages, etc. So are there any guidelines in terms of how PDF processors are supposed to deal with logical structure? From my experience, as soon as some application touches this tag PDFs, essentially they mess with the whole structure. So So are there any guidelines in terms of?
As far as I understand, there are no guidelines. So every operation you do, it's like editing or removing pages or something like that. You just have to make sure that you as a developer, you have to make sure that the structure tree is synced with the resulting file there. Of course, if you add watermark, it's easier to mark it and provide as an artifact or something. If you are editing, it's a lot worse because you have to first change the marked content, you have to reorganize the structure tree. Nothing like that is kind of mandatory. PDF isn't supposed to be edited. That's buried somewhere in a PDF specification, hidden under the small names, but that's the fact. Every operation on a PDF is costly and it generates burdens. Of course, when we're talking about PDF UA, there are some guidelines how to process the structure tree, which is implemented in JAWS, in screen readers and so on. But that's a different story.